At 21 before 4, you're watching Today here on eNCA. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now we look into the psychological perspective. What could be the reasons behind the actions of convicted murderer and rapist Thabo Bester? Well, he claims his mother abandoned him when he was young and leaving him to be raised by his grandmother. You'll remember Bester's mother also confirmed he was conceived as a result of rape. Now, to help you and I unpack this, let's bring in clinical psychologist Themba Manzini. Themba, a very good afternoon and welcome to the show. Let's just start right there. The psychological impact of a troublesome childhood that Thabo Bester allegedly experienced. Does that have any impact on the menace that he is today?
Okay, good afternoon and thanks for the opportunity so that we unpack this matter. I think maybe a disclaimer from my side is that when we look at psychological behavior, sometimes we might need to have done intensive assessment, but based on the general or public information and what we know and what you are raising in terms of troublesome childhood, we do know through research that a troublesome childhood could predict behavior problems, and then the behavior problems could range from many things, and that can include inappropriate behavior or manners, as you said, and it can also include criminal behavior that we're looking at. So in general, most troublesome children, we need to pay much more attention to them so that they get the right help, so that we deviate them from these behavioral problems we're talking about.
Themba, we know from previous interviews with some forensic psychologists who had previously spoken to Thabo Bester that he was allegedly raped as a child or sexually assaulted. And I imagine, and this was back in 2011 when these findings came to light. Fast forward to 2022, 2023, when you and I are now, does that have any bearing on the sort of character we are seeing before us?
It could be determined because there is a likelihood or a chance or a probability that it could have an influence into his current or maybe alleged behavior of late, or maybe there were charges that alleged against or alleged or put forth towards him. But what we need to know is that behavior is complex, and it is actually a combination of different elements, different challenges that one could face or how they are raised, and the trauma that you're including as well, how he has dealt with that trauma can predispose him to further risk or further questionable or problematic behavior later on in life. So a possibility is them, and again, this is where we also need to remind everyone at home that we need to ensure that most of the significant traumas that people go through, we must not take them lightly, but we need to focus on them so that we are able to avert some of possible behavioral problems going forward in one's life.
And we'll talk about those traumas, Themba, when we speak about his victims who are obviously watching the news and are seeing everything unfold in real time. I'd like to talk about his alleged accomplice, Dr. Nandipha Magudumane. What sort of demeanor must one have to coerce someone into doing the things that we now know have come to light? Things like getting dead bodies, things like being in cahoots to dupe the nation into believing that you're in New York when you are in fact in a prison cell here in South Africa. What's happening in his mind?
Yeah, so most likely, whenever behavior presents itself, there could be intention, there could be planning. And as I mentioned, we do have where we do have predominantly most personality traits when we look at someone like him or other people like him. And they are manipulative, and some of them, they are charming. That They're easy. It's more like con artists. They don't need the gun, but they can manipulate you into giving them money without any force or coercion. So when we look at the possible personality traits, they can help us understand how possible it was for him maybe to work with someone like Dr. Nandipa, and also to can be able to convince other people. But again, there is also a plan, there is also a desire to achieve a certain lifestyle that will make them content and happy. So some of these things, they've got the motives, or there is unconscious behavior whereby some of the things are playing out, but in a way of trying to deal. It could be possibly some of the past traumas that we might have alluded. So those are some of the things we need to take into consideration.
And when we look at the doctor herself, I mean, this is someone who was seemingly having a very, call it decorated career in the medical profession, right? And now being involved with a murderer and rapist in this fashion, to a point where she was even on the run with him. What psychologically do you think, or can you deduce, could have driven her?
Yes, I can go back to those personality traits, the manipulative, but there are those who've got needy tendencies, who are dependent on others. And again, this is general things that we need to look at, especially when we're looking for our partners, because sometimes you find that when you meet in a relationship, you find that it's either the type of behavior from both collides, or sometimes it repels, or you don't work together. So one can also try to see that perhaps herself, she also has some personality traits that could be linking her to this type of lifestyle. It could be the thrill, it could be many other things, or maybe we have not looked at her past and her. We have not done a thorough assessment with her, but on face value, it is possible that people can actually join forces and they can actually click, mainly because of the challenges they might have went through growing up, or the similarities that brings them together. But when we look at most criminal behavior, there has to be a link or an explanation. And when we look at that, we can clearly outline, but I can point out mostly that there are personality traits. You will find that she might have been having some of dependency traits that maybe when she's with him, those needs are met. So we're looking at complex behavior, not that much simple, but this is what we need to take serious, and especially for the public, that we really need to understand people and know them more, not just what we get on face value.
And let's wrap it up on this point, Themba. The victims that Thabo Bester, suffered at his hands, how should they be processing all of the information unfolding when they read the news, when they're watching the news, when they're hearing everything unfolding?
It's not an easy one to process such an information, and some of them, they might have hoped that they got justice, and later on that justice seemed to elude them and disappears. So now to go through the same process could be re-traumatizing, and I think they should have that hope and resilience with the aim of focusing on themselves and healing, and also getting therapeutic help. It will help them, especially in these tough times, because it's almost like old wounds now, even made to be more painful. So it's not an easy situation to deal with. But I think with also the support from the loved ones next to them, that will also be helpful going through this process, and almost a process that they might or could have went through before, and now starting all over again, it's likely going to trigger a lot of psychological turmoil that they might need help and support, and if need be, even psychological intervention.
That's clinical psychologist Themba Manzini of Themba Psychological Services, Inc. Thank you so much for your time and insights this afternoon.